Hello everybody. Today we're going to take a look at more PowerShell, and we're going to look at PowerShell pipelining, or how that we can get the output of one command to insert it into the input of another command to essentially chain our commands together. And since it's the summer in the UK, today we'll not be drinking hot tea, we'll be drinking iced tea. So let's begin. So let's start off over here on the whiteboard. What about if we have a PowerShell command that we want to run? Something very simple like get-service. This is going to retrieve a list of services that are running on our computer. What about if we want to manipulate those services? We may want to start and stop them. Well, what we could do is we could go and select a service of a specific name, like for example, bits, which is the background intelligence transfer service, and then we can pipe. Now this pipe command, this one right here, this is just to the left of the Z key on your keyboard, or at least on a UK keyboard. This pipe command is going to take the output of this command, get service name bits, and actually going to insert it into the input of a new command, something like stop-service. Now what this is actually going to do is it's going to take the output here, name bits, and insert that directly into stop-service, and we're going to stop the service of bits. Now sometimes you can even pipeline multiple operations. So if for example this original get service was not just get service name bits, I could use get service name bits and maybe spooler. And what that is going to do, it's going to pass both of those bits of information, bits and spooler, into this stop service. That seems pretty straightforward. So let's go and see exactly how it works. Coming over here onto my demo computer, we're launching a PowerShell environment in our terminal, and let's just type get-service. Now, by typing get-service, we get an interesting kind of output here. Now, we've actually got a list of what's known as objects. Each one of these individual lines is actually an object. We'll go over objects in detail in a future episode. But you'll notice that each of these objects has a status, name, and display name. Now, I can actually even select just the first object here if I want to. And I pop this into a couple of curly brackets over here, and then select just 0 on that. That will select me the very first object here within this list. So we can see this is stopped. It's a service called AAR SVC. It's an agent activation runtime service running on this computer. That's perfectly fine. What I could do is I could select individual services, like for example get-service, -name, bits. That's fine too. Status, name, display name. Now here's the important bit, okay? These are not just all of the properties that are actually being returned. There's actually many more properties that are actually returned here from this bits service. If we go and run the same command again, we go and run get service name bits, but we pipe this to select star. What you'll actually see is there's a number of extra options here. There's a number of extra properties that are actually being outputted by this specific get service command down here. So we've got name, bits, required services, can pause and shut down, and so on and so forth. Now, what about if we wanted to pipe this to the stop service like we just looked at? So if I do get-service, -name, bits, pipe, stop, -service. Great, that service is now stopped. Let's go and have a look. Let's do get service name bits. We can see it's stopped. What about if we pipe it to start-service? Run that again. Takes a little bit longer because it's starting. And I run that same thing again, and we've got that status running. The question is, why did this work? This works because there's actually a pipeline hookup between these two different commands. Now there's something outputting something, there's something getting inputs, right? So when you look at a specific command like this, get service name bits, we've got a number of outputs to this command. And these outputs are our properties. So again, if I pipe that out to select star, just to select absolutely everything, these are a list of the properties, okay? So let's go and take a screenshot of that for the moment, and we're going to put that into our whiteboard, and we're going to go look at that in a second. Okay, so if we've got properties on one side that are being put across that pipeline into the new section, into, in this case, stop-service, what's stop-service doing? Well, if we look at stop-service, okay, service. There we go, and go and run this command. It's expecting an input object. In fact, if I just control C that, stop dash service, if I put a dash on it here and start tabbing through, has, as we know, quite a lot of parameters that are requiring inputs here. Now, we can go and list all these parameters out in a few different ways. One of the easiest ways of doing it is get help stop service, and we can see up here are our parameters. So we've got, for example, input object, force, no wait, pass through, include, and so on and so forth. But what about if we get a little bit more extra information? Let's just do a get help dash full on here. And what we'll notice is inside get help dash full, what we've got is we've got a number of our parameters, including things like dash name that has here accept pipeline input. And notice we can accept pipeline input true by value or by property name. Now this by property name element here, oops, lost that, there we go. This by property name element here is actually the most important selection. So what is the property name? Well, the parameter name is name, right? And if we go back and actually have a look at our property here, our property name is also called name, and the name is called bits. So in this case, what we actually have is we have a pipeline hookup. So on one part of the equation, we have our, let's just go write this out again. We have our get dash service dash name bits, and that is sending across this pipeline here all of its property information. It's sending across the pipeline all of this information that you see here. That is being passed across the pipeline into the next element. So what is being passed across here? There's a number of different things, including a property called name is equal to bits. Okay? A key value pair called name is equal bits, which is this key value pair right here, name bits. There is also other things being passed across, like can pause and can shut down and can stop, and display name and dependent services and machine name, and all these other wonderful things as well. But the one we're really interested in is the name is equal to bits, because when we pipe this across to something like stop dash service, this would help if I could type, also has dash name. And as we saw from the get help documentation a moment ago, this dash name actually has the ability to receive things across the pipeline and process them accordingly if the property name is the same. So in this case, the fact that name is being passed across the pipeline and name is the parameter, we have a pipeline hookup. And this will then get stop service to actually process stop dash service dash name bits. Now, also take note on here, this also has string with 2 square brackets. Now remember what the 2 square brackets meant from the previous videos that we've gone through. 2 square brackets means an array. That means that this string can actually take an input of multiple elements. So in this case, what we could have, let's just go back here. In this case, we could do get service name bits, or we could do get service name bits, comma, spooler, and then we're going to have the name of bits and spooler actually passed across. That's also going to mean that we're going to have bits and spooler actually processed here on the other side. Wonderful. So that's a basic pipeline hookup between these two things. Let's go look at something else though. Let's also go look at display outputs, different ways of looking at data within PowerShell. So let's come back up to our PowerShell terminal here. Just do a clear on this PowerShell terminal. Let's stick to simple things. Let's stick to get dash service dash name bits, the background intelligence transfer service. Now remember, When you're doing a command in PowerShell, a lot of the time the commands are written just to give you back the information that it thinks you need, in this case status, name and display name, whereas in reality there is a lot more information that can be provided. If we go and pipe this to a special command called get-member, okay, what you'll actually see is all the information that could actually be possibly retrieved from this get service element. Now, our PowerShell commandlets are normally built off the .NET framework, and what you'll actually see here, this type name, system.service.process.service-controller, this is an element of the .NET framework that's used to control system services, and this has things like events, alias methods and properties. Now the thing we're bothered about here is we're bothered about these specific properties. Look, this is all the information that I can actually retrieve from this get service-name bits. Now this comes up in other locations as well. If you try doing this for Active Directory, for things like get-ad user, you'll find that if you do get member, there is a lot of information that actually comes back, a heck of a lot more than you see just by default in PowerShell. Now we can display this in a couple of ways. We could use things like format-list. Now if I did format-list, we get a list of the information rather than a table of the information. If we do format-table, we get that same default table. We could abbreviate these as well, so we could do FT for format table, and we could do FL for format list. Wonderful. We can get a bit further as well. We can do Out-GridView here as well, grid view. If I run that, what we get is this lovely little box here. This is quite cool for looking at many different things. So for example, if I got rid of the name bits here and kept Out-GridView, you'll see a list of that output coming out in this little GUI interface. Now we can do something actually quite neat here. It's actually a really neat trick that not many people know. Look at this Out-GridView window and look at the bottom right hand corner of this Out-GridView window, and there's nothing here. Now I'm going to run a little bit of a special command. What about if I did this? Get-service pipe stop-service pipe. Oh, sorry. Wrong way around. Get-service pipe Out-GridView dash, a few tabs here, pass through pipe stop-service, and go and run this. Now look what I get. I've got a couple of buttons down here. I've got an OK and cancel button, because what this magical little pass-through is going to do is it's basically going to say select the things you want. So in this case, what's happening is get service is giving me a huge list of services. This pass-through is saying select which services you want, or select which elements, which objects you want to pass across this pipeline into the next one, stop-service. So I can now quite happily scroll through here and maybe filter for something like bits. Okay, that's cool, bits is there. Or maybe I want to go and say I want bits, and I want to come down here and I want to go and find another service, PQRS, the spooler service, just something that's not going to break my computer, and I'm holding control to select both of those elements down there. So I've got bits selected and I've got spooler selected, and if I click OK, that's going to pass through and it's going to stop both of those for me. Now just to see what that would actually really look like, if I run this command again and put -verbose on the end of that stop service command, it's going to give me a much larger output, a much more informative output. So let's do that again. Let's do bits, and let's do hold control, click spooler, then we're going to click OK, and you'll see this verbose output now. So performing the operation stop service on that target and performing the operation stop service on that target. Remember, within PowerShell, sometimes when you actually run a command and it goes off successfully, you won't actually see any output. So sometimes if you really want to know what's actually going on and what's happening, you can use the -verbose switch on many PowerShell commands. So one more thing with pipelining is we want to go check out this thing called calculated properties. Now this allows us to display the outputs in a slightly different way. It looks really confusing when you first see this, but it's not too much of a problem once you actually break it down. So let's have a look at this calculated property for get volume. If I go and run this command, get-volume, and run it on its own volume, press enter, you see what I get? I get a basic output result from it. Wonderful. But let's go and select just some individual properties. So let's go and run this up here. Get volume, pipe it to select object, dash property, drive letter, and size. And we get some slightly strange looking output, especially here for size. We can see that this is actually outputting my size in bytes. Now, outputting something in bytes today in 2023 is not great. We want to calculate this. We want to adjust this kind of output. And the way that we can do that is with a hash table. We're going to use something interesting in here. We're going to use this magic, and we're going to use a name and an expression. Okay. So this thing here, this at with the two curlies on it, this is actually, so zoom in a little bit more, this is actually known as a hash table. And inside this hash table, we're going to have a collection of key value pairs. Now this is a special hash table that's actually going to replace one of our properties. Now, we've got name and expression. The name is actually going to be the name of the property that I want to display. So in this case, I could use a name like, for example, size in GB, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to have an expression here. The expression is going to populate this name. So the expression for this is actually going to be dollar, whoops, let's put this in some brackets as well, $PS item dot size. Now, we need to actually kind of explain what this $PS item size actually is down here. We also need to pop this expression in some curly brackets as well. Whoops, get that the right way around. There we go. So now we have our hash table that contains our name, size in gigabytes, and our expression PS item dot size. If I take this here, grab that with Control X and replace size with it over here, we can do some interesting things. So let's just get a little bit more space. Let's get rid of that on the sides there, and let's go and run this. Okay, and what we get is we get a little bit of a problem. Let's go run that again. There we go. The hash literal was incomplete down here. So what we want to do is we want to come back in here, and we don't want to use a comma. What we actually want to use to separate these hashes is we actually want to use a semicolon in here instead, or separate these elements, these key value pairs within this hash table. Let's go and run that one more time. And what we can see now is we've got drive letter and we've got size in gigabytes. So let's explain what we've got in this section. So this name up here, this name size in gigabytes, is actually this size in gigabytes down here. It's just a label. It's just a name of a column, or in this case, a name of multiple objects in here. This expression is actually what's going to populate this. So this element down here, these individual numbers, are being retrieved across the pipeline, and they are the previous size element that's being passed across the pipeline. So let's take this again. Let's copy paste that down here, and let's just change that around to size, okay? And go and run that one. See, I've got exactly the same thing, but this time I've got size. But remember, this pipeline is taking all the properties that are coming across that pipeline. So in this case, what's being passed across pipeline? Let's do get dash volume, and let's go pipe that to select star. And we can see this is all the information that's being passed across that pipeline, including here size. Okay, for each individual volume that get volume has retrieved. So these multiple size elements coming over, and we are selecting just that size object. But remember, we want to manipulate this here. We want to manipulate this size. So what we've done here is, instead of using size, we're saying size is now called size in gigabytes, and the expression is PS item dot size. PS item is a special variable. PS item is actually going to contain everything that comes across that pipeline. You may have seen PS item, you may have actually seen $_. They are both exactly the same thing, PS item and $_. It's a default variable that contains all this information that's being passed across that pipeline that we can then select later on. In this case, we are selecting just .size. So we're selecting, in this sense, just that information from that .size property here that's being passed across the pipeline, and we're renaming its size in gigabytes. Now, there is another problem with this though, and we need to manipulate this a little bit more, because we wanted size in gigabytes, right? And if we run it, we don't have size in gigabytes. We've still got bytes. We need to calculate this. We need to format this a little bit better. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of extra code in here instead. So on the expression, what we're going to do is I'm just going to copy this into here. I'm just going to paste in a little bit of magic. I'm going to paste this guy in. Okay, one too many brackets there. And this is our property calculation. So let's have a look. Get volume, select property, drive letter, and now we've got something else in the expression. Okay, we've still got, let's take out size remaining because we just actually want the size. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're doing a couple of things. First of all, we're still selecting PS item size, but we're dividing it by 1 gigabyte. So in this case, it's actually going to select those bytes and convert them to gigabytes. Okay, that's cool. And we've got an extra bit of block of code down here. What does that do? Well, first of all, let's just take this element here. So let's just take this size and we'll just go divide that by 1 GB. And we'll go and run that code again. We'll go and run that line again. And what we see now is, hey, look, we've got 63. Wonderful. But we've also got a lot of information beyond that. It didn't calculate perfectly, and we want to cut this down. We want to display this so it actually really kind of makes sense. That's what this element here is doing, the 0n2. Now what this is, it's related to this -f property. This -f property is format, and what we're essentially saying is this format property is going to take this block, which is going to be position 0. This is position 0 over here. Okay, and then position 0, what it's going to do is it's going to format it as a number to 2 decimal places. So now if I run this code and press F8 just to run that one line, you'll see I'm actually getting a proper kind of output here, and I'm getting my size in gigabytes outputted correctly as 64, 0.44, 0.09, and 126.45. You can actually adjust this kind of thing as well. It doesn't have to be numbers. For example, if you change that to a C and go and run that now, you can see it's actually changed that to a currency. The currency that it changes it to, in this case it's changed to dollars, is actually relevant to the operating system's location. Now, even though I'm in the UK, this is actually a virtual machine that's running in Azure that thinks it's in the US. Okay? Hence, it's got $1 there. If I ran that exact same information, if I take that same code and I run that on my personal desktop computer here and run it, you'll notice that the currency it brings back is pounds. So the currency is related to where the physical computer is located or wherever it's set to. So I don't want that in currency either. I still want that just as N for numbers, and that'll show me size in gigabytes. So now what you've seen is taking the output of one command, pipelining it into another command, and also manipulating those properties as they come out the other side. I hope this has been enjoyable to you, and you'll join me next time for another episode of PowerShell, and I hope you learn more. And you know the routine, hashtag like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed this video and will join me next time. Goodbye.